I opened my dream restaurant and invited my family to the grand opening. Not one of them showed up, not even my wife. They all went to my brother's promotion party. Instead, as I closed up alone, my wife texted, "We need to discuss the restaurant." But my response shocked them all. "My name's Mason Blake, and let me tell you something about dreams. They're a lot like soufflés, beautiful in theory, but prone to collapsing the second you stop watching them." I'd spent the last 2 years of my life building the Ember table from the ground up, pouring every cent I had, every ounce of hope I could scrape together, and roughly 60% of my sanity into creating what I genuinely believed would be the kind of restaurant people wrote about in those pretentious foodie blogs with names like Fork Yeah or The Umami Diaries. We're talking warm Edison bulb lighting that made everyone look like they'd just stepped out of a vintage filter, a playlist I personally curated with enough indie folk and smooth jazz to make even the most cynical millennial feel something resembling human emotion, and a menu so meticulously crafted that I legitimately thought Gordon Ramsay might shed a single, perfectly seasoned tear if he ever laid eyes on it. I sent out invitations 3 weeks in advance. Not those generic paperless post things either. I'm talking actual printed cards with embossed lettering and a wax seal, because apparently I thought I was opening a restaurant in 18th century France. I addressed them personally to everyone who mattered: Mom and Dad, my younger brother Dylan, though calling him younger feels generous considering he acts like he invented adulthood, my cousins Emma and Jared, who I'd grown up with and shared countless Thanksgiving dinners with, and of course, my lovely wife Haley, who I'd been married to for 4 years and who had promised, cross her heart, hope to die, promised, that she'd be there with bells on. I imagined the whole scene playing out like some heartwarming movie montage. Everyone clapping when I gave my welcome speech, taking selfies in front of the signature dish, maybe even getting a little teary-eyed while saying things like, "We always knew you'd make it," or "We're so proud of you, Mason." Instead, what I got was crickets. And I'm not talking about the peaceful, meditative kind of crickets you hear on a warm summer night that make you feel connected to nature and the universe. I'm talking about the soul-crushing, deafening silence of a restaurant that was supposed to be packed with the people I loved most, celebrating the culmination of everything I'd worked for, but instead sat emptier than a politician's promises during election season. The door stayed closed except for when I nervously peeked out every 5 minutes like some desperate puppy waiting for its owner to come home. The phone stayed silent except for one telemarketer who wanted to discuss my car's extended warranty, which felt like the universe's way of twisting the knife. My soul didn't just leave my body. It packed a bag, called an Uber, and left a note saying, "It's not you. It's definitely you." I stood there in my chef's whites that I'd had professionally pressed for the occasion, surrounded by tables set with gleaming silverware and folded napkins that I'd watched 17 YouTube videos to learn how to arrange into fancy swans, feeling like the world's most pathetic wedding groom who'd been left at the altar, except somehow worse, because at least that guy could claim he dodged a bullet. I'd prepared enough food to feed 40 people. The kitchen was stocked with fresh ingredients that had cost me more than most people's monthly car payments. I had 3 servers standing around looking at me with a mixture of pity and concern, probably wondering if they should call someone or if this was just normal chef behavior. Around the halfway point of what was supposed to be a triumphant evening, I found myself stress-eating breadsticks that no one had touched, washing them down with tap water because I couldn't even bring myself to open one of the nice bottles of wine I'd saved for toasting. Then, because the universe apparently decided I hadn't suffered enough, my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. Dylan had posted a story. My finger hovered over it for a solid 10 seconds because some part of my brain, the part that still had a shred of self-preservation instinct, knew that whatever I was about to see would hurt. But curiosity and masochism are close cousins, so I tapped it anyway. The screen filled with a video of what could only be described as the world's most aggressively mediocre backyard barbecue, complete with string lights from Home Depot and a folding table covered in red Solo cups. The caption read, "Promotion Party Vibes," with approximately 47 unnecessary emojis including 3 champagne bottles, a briefcase, and inexplicably, a taco. But here's the thing that really made my eye twitch. Everyone was there. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. My mom was visible in the background doing that awkward white person dance she does when she's had exactly 1.5 glasses of Chardonnay. My dad was manning the grill with the kind of concentrated focus he usually reserved for March Madness brackets. My cousins were playing cornhole and laughing like they were starring in a beer commercial. And there, right in the center of the frame, looking like she'd never been happier in her entire life, was my wife Haley, her arm draped around Dylan's shoulders while they both grinned at the camera like they'd just won the lottery. She was wearing the dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she said made her feel beautiful. Apparently, it also made her feel like skipping her husband's restaurant opening to celebrate Dylan's promotion to assistant regional manager of whatever soul-sucking corporate job he'd been climbing the ladder at for the past 6 years. Oh, and just to add that final chef's kiss of insult to injury, I spotted my dog in the corner of the frame. My dog, the golden retriever I'd rescued, named, trained, and loved unconditionally. He was wearing a custom bandana that read, "Congrats, Uncle Dylan," in glittery letters. Someone had taken the time to order a custom bandana for my dog to wear to my brother's promotion party on the same night as my restaurant opening. Let that sink in. They'd planned ahead. This wasn't some last-minute thing. This was premeditated celebration. I stood there in my empty restaurant, phone in one hand, half-eaten breadstick in the other, trying to process what I was seeing. The warm lighting that was supposed to make everyone look beautiful now just made the empty chairs look more depressing. The carefully curated playlist was now just sad background music for my personal tragedy. A Norah Jones song came on, something about coming away with me, and I genuinely considered throwing my phone through the front window just to feel something other than this hollow ache in my chest. Instead, I walked over to the bar, grabbed one of the bottles of house wine I'd been saving, poured myself a glass that was definitely more than the recommended 5-ounce serving, and raised it to the empty room. To the most expensive therapy session ever, I announced to absolutely no one. My voice echoed slightly in the space, which somehow made everything worse. Even the acoustics were mocking me. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning tables that no one had sat at, washing glasses that no one had drunk from, and occasionally checking my phone to see if anyone would notice I existed. Nothing. Not a single text asking where I was or how the opening went. It was like I'd become invisible, or worse, like I'd never mattered in the first place. At one point, one of the servers, a college kid named Marcus who I'd hired because he actually seemed to give a damn about food, approached me cautiously and asked if I wanted him to stay. I told him to go home, that I'd handle closing up by myself. He looked relieved and guilty in equal measure as he grabbed his jacket and left. Alone in the Ember table, surrounded by everything I'd built and no one to share it with, I finally let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. My family had chosen my brother's middle management promotion over my dream. My wife had stood there smiling in a dress I'd bought her, celebrating someone else while I stood here wondering what I'd done wrong. And somewhere in a backyard across town, my dog was probably getting belly rubs and treats while wearing that stupid bandana. I finished my wine, locked up the restaurant, and drove home in complete silence, not even bothering to turn on the radio. When I walked into my apartment, Haley wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. She was probably still at Dylan's party, probably staying to help clean up like the supportive family member she apparently was to everyone except me. I collapsed onto the couch still wearing my chef's whites and stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. Tomorrow, I'd have to figure out what to do next. Tonight, I just wanted to stop existing for a while. Around midnight, as I was aggressively wiping down tables that no human being had actually sat at with the kind of fury usually reserved for people scrubbing crime scenes, my phone buzzed against the bar top with that specific vibration pattern that told me it was a text message from my wife. I'd programmed it that way back when we first started dating, thinking it was romantic to have a special notification just for her. Now it felt more like a warning system, like those emergency broadcast alerts that tell you a tornado is heading your way and you should probably take shelter immediately. I stopped mid-wipe, stared at the phone for a solid 10 seconds while some indie folk song about heartbreak played through the speakers because apparently the universe had a sixth sense of irony, and then picked it up with the kind of dread usually reserved for opening medical bills or checking your bank account after a Vegas weekend. The message was short, clinical, and about as warm as a morgue freezer. We need to discuss the restaurant. That's it. No. Hey, honey. Or, sorry I missed your opening. Or, I'm a terrible human being who should probably reevaluate her life choices. Just, we need to discuss the restaurant. with a period at the end like she was my disappointed middle school principal about to lecture me on my failing grades. I could practically hear the tone through the screen. That specific combination of condescension and fake concern that people use when they're about to tell you something is for your own good, right before they completely trash your dreams. The translation was crystal clear. We need to discuss how much money you just wasted on this vanity project while I was out there being a supportive family member to people who actually matter. I could already hear the conversation in my head. She'd sit me down with that serious face she makes when she's about to deliver bad news. The one where her lips get all thin and she clasps her hands together like she's about to lead a prayer circle, and she'd explain in that maddeningly calm voice how maybe this restaurant thing wasn't practical, and perhaps I should consider going back to working for someone else. You know, somewhere stable with benefits and a future that doesn't involve financial ruin. I didn't respond right away because I'm not an idiot and I know that anything I typed in my current mental state would probably qualify as evidence in a divorce proceeding. Instead, I just stood there staring at those 5 words, my thumb hovering over the keyboard while my brain cycled through approximately 47 different responses ranging from passive-aggressive to actively aggressive to just aggressive-aggressive. I imagined her sitting in Dylan's living room, probably on that expensive leather couch he'd bought with his big promotion bonus, sipping cheap champagne from a plastic cup because my brother thinks spending more than $12 on wine is fiscally irresponsible. She was probably surrounded by my family, all of them nodding along as someone, probably my mom, said something like, "Well, we didn't want to discourage Mason, but we always thought the restaurant was a bit ambitious." The rage that had been simmering in my chest all evening suddenly reached a full boil. My fingers started moving across the keyboard before my brain could stop them, typing out a response that was probably going to nuke my marriage from orbit, but honestly, at this point, what did I have to lose? My dignity was already doing the backstroke in the toilet, so I might as well go down swinging. Effective immediately, the restaurant is closed to all family. No reservations, no discounts, no drop-bys, no emotional support visits that are actually just thinly veiled judgment sessions. Please enjoy the leftover burnt hot dogs and potato salad from my brother's barbecue. I hear the food poisoning ads character. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. And let me tell you, there's a special kind of satisfaction that comes from burning a bridge when you're already standing in the ashes of your expectations. It's liberating in the way that quitting a terrible job is liberating, or telling off that one customer who's been verbally abusing the waitstaff for the past hour. Sure, there might be consequences, but in that moment, it feels absolutely worth it. The response was immediate and catastrophic. My phone started buzzing like it was having a seizure. Text messages started flooding in so fast, I couldn't even read them before the next one appeared. Then the call started. 1 missed call. 2, 5, 10, 23 missed calls in approximately 10 minutes, which I'm pretty sure violated some kind of telecommunications decency law. My phone's battery was draining faster than my will to live earlier that evening. The screen just kept lighting up with names. Mom, Dad, Dylan, Dylan again, Haley, my cousin Emma, who I hadn't actually spoken to in like 6 months, but apparently now had opinions about my life choices. Even my Aunt Carol, who I'm 90% sure doesn't actually know how to use a cell phone. I silenced the phone and went back to cleaning, scrubbing the already clean bar top with the kind of intensity usually reserved for Lady Macbeth trying to get blood out of her hands. The physical activity felt good, like I was scrubbing away the entire evening along with the non-existent food stains. I was so focused on my aggressive cleaning that I almost didn't hear the knock at the back door, the one that led to the alley where we took out the trash and occasionally caught employees sneaking cigarette breaks. I stood there for a moment, debating whether to ignore it and pretend I'd already left, but the knocking persisted with the kind of determination that told me whoever was out there wasn't going away. With a sigh that came from somewhere deep in my soul, I walked over and yanked open the door, already preparing my "we're closed, and also I hate you" speech. Dylan stood there looking like a cologne commercial directed by someone who'd never actually met a human being before. He was wearing what I can only describe as business casual trying too hard. A button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to show off his Apple Watch, khakis that probably cost more than my first car, and boat shoes without socks because apparently he thought he was spending his weekend in the Hamptons instead of ruining mine in suburban America. His hair was perfectly styled with that carefully tousled look that takes 20 minutes and 3 different products to achieve, but is supposed to look effortless. He reeked of guilt and what I'm pretty sure was Drakkar Noir, which explained a lot about his life choices. In his hands, he held a flimsy paper plate covered in aluminum foil, grease already seeping through the bottom in a way that suggested whatever was under there had been sitting out for several hours and was probably a biohazard at this point. Figured you'd want something to eat, he said with that grin. You know the one. That fake car salesman. I'm about to sell you lemon but pretend it's a Ferrari. Grin that made me want to punch him in his perfectly whitened teeth. It was the same grin he'd used when he convinced me to invest in his foolproof cryptocurrency scheme back in 2018, or when he'd borrowed my car and returned it with an empty gas tank and a mysterious stain on the passenger seat. I looked at the plate, then at him, then back at the plate. The aluminum foil was crinkled and hastily applied, like someone had just grabbed whatever sad leftovers were sitting on the counter and shoved them at him, while saying, "Go check on your brother before he does something crazy." Through the foil, I could make out the shape of what might have been a hamburger, or possibly a very flat meatloaf, or for all I knew, a hockey puck someone had mistakenly put on the grill. "Thanks," I said, my voice dripping with so much sarcasm it could have filled one of my empty soup tureens. But I prefer my meat unseasoned with betrayal and absent of the distinct flavor of emotional abandonment. Also, I'm a chef. If I wanted food, I'd make something that doesn't look like it lost a fight with a garbage disposal. Dylan's grin faltered for just a second, a crack in the facade that told me my words had actually landed. Good. I wanted them to land. I wanted them to hit him right in his perfectly inflated ego and deflate it like a sad birthday balloon 3 weeks after the party. "Look, man," he started, shifting his weight from one boat-shoed foot to the other. It wasn't personal. The party was planned weeks ago, and my restaurant opening was planned months ago. I interrupted, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. I sent out invitations. Physical invitations with your name on them. Hell, I even included a little note about how I couldn't wait to have you there. But sure, your middle management promotion definitely takes priority over 2 years of my life. He had the audacity to look hurt, like I was being unreasonable. Middle management? I'm an assistant regional manager now, Mason. It's a big deal. You know what else is a big deal? I said, taking the paper plate from his hands, just so I could immediately throw it in the trash can next to the door. Building something from nothing. Creating something meaningful. Following your actual dreams instead of climbing a corporate ladder that leads nowhere except to a slightly bigger cubicle and the privilege of attending more pointless meetings. The grease from the plate left a stain on my palm, and I wiped it on my chef's coat with disgust. The next morning, I woke up on my couch still wearing my chef's whites, which had somehow transformed overnight from pristine professional attire into a wrinkled monument to my misery, complete with mystery stains that I'm pretty sure were a combination of wine, tears, and the general essence of disappointment. My neck hurt from sleeping at an angle that chiropractors probably use as a case study for what not to do. My mouth tasted like something had died in it, and then been resurrected just to die again. And my phone was still blowing up with messages that I had absolutely zero intention of reading. Haley had apparently come home at some point during the night, because I could hear her moving around in the bedroom, probably organizing her thoughts into a PowerPoint presentation about why I was being dramatic and needed to be reasonable about the whole situation. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. Once you're there, you've got nothing left to lose, which means you're free to make the kind of decisions that responsible, well-adjusted adults would probably advise against. And I was feeling particularly free that morning. Unhinged, even. The kind of unhinged that makes you do things like order an entire pizza for breakfast or respond to work emails with nothing but GIF reactions, or, in my case, declare war on your entire family using the power of petty revenge and a laminated sign. I dragged myself off the couch, ignored Haley's pointed questions about where I'd been and why I hadn't come to bed, and headed straight to the Ember table with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since before the opening. I stopped at a 24-hour print shop on the way, the kind of place that's open at weird hours specifically to service college kids making last-minute posters for protests or drunk people who suddenly need to print out memes at 3 in the morning. The guy behind the counter looked at my disheveled appearance and the message I wanted printed with the kind of neutral expression that told me he'd seen way weirder things during his shift. 20 minutes later, I was standing in front of my restaurant with a beautifully laminated sign that read, in bold, professional lettering. Due to overwhelming support from everyone except my relatives, the Ember Table is now a family-free zone. No walk-ins, no reservations, no drop-bys, no discounts, and absolutely no freeloaders named Dylan or anyone who shares his DNA. Management reserves the right to refuse service to anyone related to me by blood or marriage. Thank you for your understanding. I taped it right to the front door, center placement, impossible to miss. Then I took a photo of it, posted it to Instagram with the caption, "New policy, who dis?" and went inside to start my prep work for the day because even in the midst of an emotional breakdown, guard manger waits for no man. What happened next can only be described as the internet doing what the internet does best, taking something personal and making it go absolutely viral for reasons that both restore and destroy your faith in humanity simultaneously. Within 2 hours, my post had been shared by a local food blogger who wrote, "Finally, a man who seasoned his boundaries with sarcasm and served them with a side of justified pettiness." Then a lifestyle influencer picked it up, then a Twitter account dedicated to restaurant drama. Then somehow it made its way to one of those Facebook pages that suburban moms follow religiously, the ones with names like Wine Moms Against Toxic Family Dynamics, or whatever. My phone started blowing up again, but this time it wasn't angry family members. It was complete strangers sending messages of support, sharing their own stories of family betrayal, and asking if they could make reservations. The restaurant's Instagram went from its sad little follower count of 237, most of whom were probably bots or people who followed me by accident, to over 15,000 in a matter of hours. Local news websites were writing articles with headlines like "Restaurant Owner Bans Entire Family After No-Show at Grand Opening," and "Chef Serves Up Cold Dish of Revenge." A radio DJ mentioned it during morning drive time, calling me the hero we didn't know we needed. Of course, this meant that my actual family saw it too, which resulted in exactly the kind of reaction you'd expect from people who suddenly realize their private drama has become public entertainment. My mom called at approximately 9:30 in the morning, her voice hitting that specific pitch that dogs can probably hear in the next county. "Mason Alexander Blake," she started, using my full name like I was 12 years old and had just been caught shoplifting candy from the grocery store. "This is absolutely childish. You're embarrassing the entire family with this stunt. Do you know how many people have called me this morning asking about this? Your Aunt Carol saw it on Facebook." "Facebook, Mason. She's sharing it with her church group." I leaned against the prep counter in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, and felt a smile spread across my face for the first time in what felt like years. "You're right, Mom," I said, my voice dripping with mock sincerity. "I should have been way more mature about the whole thing. Like, maybe I should have just silently accepted that my entire family chose to skip the most important day of my professional life to eat burnt hot dogs in celebration of Dylan's participation trophy of a promotion. That definitely sounds like the grown-up thing to do." "We didn't skip it to hurt you," she protested, but her voice had that edge to it that meant she knew she was on thin ice and was trying to backpedal without actually admitting fault. "Dylan's party was planned weeks in advance, and we thought." "You thought what exactly?" I interrupted, my sarcasm giving way to genuine anger. "You thought I wouldn't notice? You thought I wouldn't care? Or did you just not think about me at all, because that would have required acknowledging that I exist as something other than the family disappointment who chose cooking over a real career?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that speaks volumes about things people don't want to say out loud. Finally, she spoke again, her voice smaller now. "That's not fair, Mason. We've always supported you." "Yeah?" I said, looking around my empty restaurant, at all the prep work I was doing alone because I couldn't afford to pay my staff to just stand around. Where was that support last night? Where was it when I was standing here by myself, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life? You know what? Don't answer that. I already saw it on Dylan's Instagram story, wearing a party hat and doing the Macarena. I hung up before she could respond because I'd learned a long time ago that conversations with my mother had a way of going in circles until you forgot what you were even arguing about and somehow ended up apologizing for things that weren't your fault. Besides, I had actual work to do, and wallowing in family drama wasn't going to get the risotto prepared or the sauces made. Later that afternoon, Haley showed up at the restaurant with the kind of expression that meant she'd appointed herself as the family's ambassador of damage control. She was wearing her serious conversation outfit, a blazer over jeans, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a way that was supposed to look casual, but probably took 20 minutes to achieve. She stood in the doorway for a moment, probably trying to figure out the best angle of approach, before walking over to where I was breaking down a chicken with more aggression than was strictly necessary. "Mason, we need to talk about this," she said, gesturing vaguely at the sign on the door, which I noticed she'd conveniently not removed despite walking right past it. "Oh, we're talking now," I said, not looking up from my work. "That's interesting. I tried calling you last night, multiple times, but you were too busy celebrating my brother to answer." "It was a misunderstanding," she said, using that calm, rational tone that people use when they're trying to de-escalate a situation they helped create. "We didn't realize your opening was the same night. The dates got mixed up." I set down my knife carefully, took a deep breath, and finally looked at her. "Haley, I sent out invitations 3 weeks ago. Physical invitations. You helped me address the envelopes. You specifically said, and I quote, 'I can't wait to see everyone's faces when they try your food.' So either you have the memory of a goldfish with severe amnesia, or you're lying to my face right now." She had the decency to look uncomfortable, shifting her weight and breaking eye contact. "Okay, fine. Yes, we knew. But Dylan really wanted everyone there, and it felt important to support him. And it didn't feel important to support me?" I interrupted, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Your husband? The person you supposedly love and want to build a life with? That guy wasn't worth supporting." "That's not what I'm saying," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "You have to understand, Dylan's been working toward this promotion for years, and—" "Stop," I said, holding up my hand. "Just stop. Here's what I understand. You chose him over me. My entire family chose him over me. And you know what the really pathetic part is? I'm not even surprised. This is just a bigger, more expensive version of every family dinner, every holiday, every single time I've been made to feel like my dreams don't matter because they're not practical or realistic, like Precious Dylan's corporate career." A couple walked past the window outside, saw the sign, and actually pointed at it while laughing. One of them took a photo. Haley noticed and winced. "You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be," she said quietly. "No," I corrected her. "I'm finally making it into exactly the deal it should have been all along. You want to know what happened last night after you left Dylan's party? An old couple came in, complete strangers. They'd seen my post online and wanted to support the chef who had the balls to ban his family. Those were their actual words. They ordered the prix-fixe menu. They asked questions about the ingredients. They listened when I talked about the inspiration behind each dish. They treated me and my restaurant with more respect in 2 hours than my own family has in 2 years. 2 days later, my dad showed up at my apartment uninvited, which should have been my first clue that whatever was about to happen would make my life exponentially more complicated. He had that look on his face, the one he'd perfected over 35 years of being a small business owner. That specific expression that said he was about to deliver a TED Talk titled, "Let me tell you what's wrong with your life choices," while pretending I'm here to help. He was wearing his weekend casual outfit, which for my dad meant jeans that probably cost more than my monthly utilities bill, a polo shirt with the logo of some country club he belonged to, and loafers that definitely did not come from a regular store where normal people shop. His hair was graying at the temples in that distinguished way that made people trust him with their money, and he carried himself with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. I was standing in my doorway wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, "Trust me, I'm a chef," with various food stains that told the story of my breakfast attempts, holding a cup of coffee that had gone cold approximately an hour ago because I'd been too busy responding to reservation requests and angry family texts to actually drink it. The contrast between us was probably enough to make one of those expectation versus reality memes. "Mason," he started, using that tone that immediately put me on the defensive, the one that parents develop that somehow manages to sound both concerned and disappointed simultaneously. "Your mother's very upset. Your brother's confused. He doesn't understand why you're so angry with him. Can we talk? I leaned against the doorframe, taking a sip of my cold coffee just to have something to do with my hands other than slam the door in his face. Sure, Dad. I charge by the hour now, though. Going rate for emotional labor is about $200, and that's the family discount. Oh wait, I don't do those anymore. His jaw tightened for just a second, that little muscle near his temple twitching in the way it always did when he was trying not to lose his temper. That's what I want to talk about. This whole banning the family thing, the social media posts, the sign on your door, it's unprofessional, son. It makes you look petty. Petty. I repeated, letting the word hang in the air between us like a bad smell. You know what's petty, Dad? Choosing a backyard barbecue for a middle management promotion over your son's restaurant opening. That's petty. What I'm doing is called having boundaries. But I can see how you'd confuse the two since you've spent most of my life treating my feelings like they're optional accessories to your family dynamic. He sighed, that long-suffering sound that parents make when they think their children are being deliberately difficult, and ran his hand through his hair. We're not enemies here, Mason. In fact, I came here because I was thinking about helping you out. Financially. And there it was. The real reason for the visit. My dad didn't do anything without a business angle, without some way to turn a situation to his advantage. I should have seen it coming from a mile away, but part of me, the stupid, hopeful part that still wanted parental approval despite overwhelming evidence that it wasn't coming, had briefly wondered if maybe he was here to apologize. By helping, you mean buying a controlling share of my restaurant, right? I said, my voice flat. So you can turn it into whatever vision you have while I become basically an employee in my own business? Oh, and let me guess, Dylan would be involved somehow. Maybe as general manager? Or would you go straight to making him co-owner? My dad's expression shifted, and I knew I'd hit close to the mark. Dylan has a business degree from a reputable school. He understands profit margins, overhead costs, market analysis, things that you, frankly, don't have much experience with. You're a talented chef, Mason, nobody's denying that. But running a restaurant is about more than just cooking good food. It's about sustainability, growth projections, return on investment. Stop, I interrupted, holding up my hand. Just stop right there before you launch into the full PowerPoint presentation I know you've already prepared in your head. Let me break this down for you in terms even a business major could understand. No, that's it. That's the whole answer. Just no. He looked genuinely surprised, like the thought that I might refuse his offer had never actually occurred to him. You're not even going to hear me out? Mason, be reasonable. Your restaurant has been open for barely 3 days, and you've already made enemies out of your entire family. Do you know how bad that looks to potential investors? To customers? People want to support businesses that are stable, that have good family values. Good family values, I said, and I actually laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that surprised even me. That's rich coming from the man whose family values apparently include abandoning one son to celebrate the other. You want to know what my viral social media post did for my business, Dad? I'm booked solid for the next 2 weeks. I've had 3 food critics request reservations. A lifestyle magazine wants to do a feature. I've gotten more genuine support from complete strangers in the past 48 hours than I've gotten from my own family in 2 years. So forgive me if I don't immediately jump at the chance to hand over creative control of my dream to the people who couldn't even be bothered to show up on opening night. My dad's face was getting red now, that particular shade that meant he was moving from disappointed to actually angry. You think this little burst of attention is going to sustain a business? You think controversy and pettiness are good long-term strategies? This is exactly why you need guidance, Mason. You're thinking with your emotions instead of your head. My emotions? I said, my voice rising. You mean the emotions that you and Mom and Dylan have spent the last 2 days telling me are invalid? The hurt feelings that I'm supposed to just get over, because family is family, and we all need to move past this? Those emotions. I'm trying to help you, he said, his voice taking on that edge of frustration that meant he was used to people accepting his help without question. I'm offering you actual capital, business expertise, connections in the community. Do you know how many restaurants fail in their first year? 70%. 70%, Mason. And that's with experienced management. You're running on pride and spite right now, and that's not a business model. You're right, I said, and watched his expression shift to something like satisfaction before I continued. Pride and spite aren't a business model. But you know what is? Having a clear vision, refusing to compromise on quality, and building something authentic that people actually want to support. My restaurant isn't failing, Dad. It's not even struggling. The only thing that's struggling is your ability to accept that I might actually succeed without your help or Dylan's business degree or any of the bullshit guidance you've been trying to shove down my throat since I told you I wanted to be a chef instead of joining your company." He took a step back, and for a second I saw something flicker across his face. Maybe hurt. Maybe just surprised that I was actually standing up to him for once. "Is that really what you think? That I don't want you to succeed?" "I think you want me to succeed on your terms," I said, my voice quieter now, but no less firm. "I think you want me to fit into whatever box makes sense to you, and when I don't, when I choose something different, you see it as a failure before I've even had a chance to try. You couldn't even give me one night, Dad. One night to celebrate something I built from nothing. Was that really too much to ask?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush whatever relationship we'd had before this conversation. My dad stood there in the hallway of my apartment building, his expensive loafers looking out of place on the worn carpet, and for the first time in my life, I saw him look uncertain. Dylan's promotion was important to him, he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. "And my restaurant was important to me," I shot back. "But I guess we've established which one mattered more to this family." He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "If you change your mind about my offer—" "I won't," I interrupted. "But thanks for stopping by. Give my regards to Mom and tell Dylan I said congratulations on his participation trophy. I'm sure the assistant regional manager of whatever will do great things with his middle management empire." I started to close the door, but my dad put his hand against it, not forcefully, but enough to stop me. "Mason, I know you're angry right now, but you need to think about your future. Your marriage. Haley's worried about you." "Haley's worried about me?" I said, incredulous. "Haley, who chose your son's barbecue over her husband's dream." "That Haley? Tell you what, Dad, you can let her know that I'm thinking real hard about a lot of things right now, and our marriage is definitely on that list." His expression shifted to alarm. "Now hold on, you can't make rash decisions. Isn't that exactly what you think I did with the restaurant?" I said, "Funny how when it's my marriage on the line, suddenly I need to slow down and think things through. But when it's my career, my passion, my entire life's work, I'm supposed to just hand it over to you and Dylan without question." I closed the door before he could respond, turned the deadbolt with perhaps more force than necessary, and stood there listening to his footsteps retreat down the hallway. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the local food critic who'd requested a reservation. "Looking forward to Friday. Heard the drama. Even more interested in the food. Don't disappoint. No pressure or anything." Haley came home that night with the energy of someone who'd been thoroughly briefed by my father and had spent the entire drive back rehearsing her intervention speech in the car mirror. I could tell because she had that specific look on her face, the one where her eyebrows were slightly raised and her lips were pressed together in a thin line that was supposed to convey concern, but really just screamed judgment. She walked into our apartment, set her purse down on the kitchen counter with the kind of deliberate care that people use when they're trying to appear calm despite being anything but, and turned to face me with her arms crossed over her chest in what I can only describe as the universal body language for, "We need to talk, and you're not going to like it." I was sitting on the couch eating leftover pad thai straight from the container because cooking for myself after cooking all day felt like the culinary equivalent of a busman's holiday, and I'd reached that point of exhaustion where basic self-care seemed like too much effort. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the television, which was playing some cooking competition show that I was watching with the sound off, because I couldn't handle listening to another chef talk about their passion and their dreams without spiraling into an existential crisis about my own life choices. "Your dad called me," she started, which wasn't surprising but still managed to irritate me on a molecular level. "He said you were really disrespectful to him today. He was just trying to help." "Mason." I set down my pad thai, paused the television, and looked at her with the kind of exhaustion that goes beyond physical tiredness and ventures into soul-deep weariness. "Let me guess. He told you about his generous offer to basically buy my restaurant and install Dylan as my supervisor, and somehow I'm the bad guy for turning it down." "He wants to invest in your future," she said, her voice taking on that edge of exasperation that meant she'd already decided I was being unreasonable and was just going through the motions of having this conversation. He has experience running successful businesses. Dylan has training in restaurant management. They could actually help you turn the Ember table into something sustainable instead of whatever chaos you're creating right now with your vendetta against the family. My vendetta, I repeated slowly, letting each syllable hang in the air like smoke. That's what we're calling it. Not justified response to being completely abandoned on the most important night of my professional life, or reasonable boundary setting after years of being treated like the family disappointment. We're going with vendetta. Haley sighed and moved to sit on the chair across from me, perching on the edge like she might need to make a quick escape. You're being dramatic, Mason. Nobody abandoned you. We made a mistake with the timing, and we've apologized. No, I interrupted, sitting up straighter. Actually, you haven't. Not really. You've explained, you've justified, you've minimized, you've told me I'm overreacting, but nobody has actually said, I'm sorry for hurting you, and I understand why you're upset. There's a difference between an apology and an excuse, and what I've been getting for the past 3 days is exclusively excuses. She looked away, her jaw tightening in that way it did when she knew I had a point but didn't want to admit it. Fine. I'm sorry. We're all sorry. But this tantrum you're throwing isn't helping anything. You're damaging your reputation, you're alienating your family, and honestly, you're putting our marriage at risk over something that should have been a minor misunderstanding. A minor misunderstanding, I said, and I felt something crack inside me, like a dam that had been holding back weeks or months or maybe years of resentment finally giving way. Haley, do you even hear yourself right now? You're calling the complete destruction of my trust in this family a minor misunderstanding. You're acting like I'm throwing a fit over someone forgetting to return a phone call, not deliberately choosing to skip the opening of my restaurant. The thing I've been planning and working toward for 2 years, the thing you watched me pour my life savings and my entire soul into. So you could all go eat hot dogs and celebrate Dylan getting a promotion that comes with a 20% raise and a slightly bigger cubicle. It wasn't deliberate, she protested, but her voice was weaker now. We didn't sit around plotting to hurt you. Dylan's party was planned first, and everyone had already committed. Stop, I said, holding up my hand. Just stop. I sent out invitations 3 weeks before Dylan even announced his promotion party. I know because I checked the dates. He scheduled his celebration for the exact same night as my opening, either because he genuinely didn't care about my timeline, or because, and this is the option I'm leaning toward, he specifically wanted to see if he could pull everyone away from me. And guess what? He succeeded. My own wife chose him over me. Haley's face flushed red, and I could see her shifting from defensive to offensive, her posture straightening as she prepared to launch her counterattack. You know what your problem is, Mason? You've always been jealous of Dylan. Ever since we were dating, you've had this chip on your shoulder about him being more successful, more stable, more favored by my family. I finished for her. Yeah, Haley, I have noticed that my parents have spent the last 33 years of my life making it crystal clear that Dylan is the golden child, and I'm the risky investment that they're not sure is going to pay off. Thanks for pointing that out. Really helpful. She stood up abruptly, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. I can't do this anymore, Mason. I can't be married to someone who's this bitter, this petty, this obsessed with old grudges. Your family loves you. They support you. But you're so wrapped up in your victim complex that you can't see it. They support me, I said flatly. Is that why none of them showed up to my opening? Is that why my dad just offered to basically buy my restaurant out from under me so Dylan could manage it? Is that why my mom called me childish for setting boundaries? That's what support looks like in this family. Haley grabbed her purse from the counter and headed toward the bedroom, but she paused in the doorway and turned back to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something cold and final that made my stomach drop. I'm giving you a choice, Mason. You can either apologize to your family, take down that ridiculous sign, accept your father's help, and try to repair these relationships, or you can keep going down this path of self-destruction and bitterness. But if you choose the latter, I'm not coming with you. I married someone who I thought was going to build a stable life, not someone who burns bridges for social media clicks. The silence that followed her ultimatum was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen, the upstairs neighbor's footsteps on the ceiling, the sound of my own heart beating in my ears. I looked at my wife of 4 years, standing in the doorway of our bedroom wearing the outfit she'd carefully selected to make this intervention more effective, and I realized with a clarity that was almost painful that we were already over. Maybe we had been for a while, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. That's really your position? I asked quietly. You're threatening to leave me unless I let my family steamroll me into giving up control of my own restaurant. I'm trying to save our marriage, she said, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. No, I corrected her. You're trying to force me to choose between my dignity and your comfort. You're asking me to apologize for being hurt, to accept help I don't want from people who don't respect me, and to pretend that everything is fine when it's very clearly not. And you know what the really messed up part is? I think you actually believe that's what love looks like. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression cycling through anger, hurt, and finally settling on something like resignation. I'll be staying at my sister's for a few days. You should think about what you really want, Mason. Because right now, it seems like you want to be right more than you want to be happy. Maybe I want to be both, I said. Maybe I'm tired of being told that I have to sacrifice one for the other just to make everyone else comfortable. Haley walked into the bedroom without responding, and I listened to her moving around, opening drawers, the sound of a suitcase being pulled from the closet. 20 minutes later, she walked past me with an overnight bag, paused at the front door as if she might say something else, then left without a word. The door clicked shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the apartment. I sat there in the dark for a long time, my pad thai getting cold and congealing in its container. The cooking show still paused on the screen with some chef frozen mid-chop, and tried to figure out how my life had imploded so spectacularly in the span of less than a week. 7 days ago, I'd been excited, nervous, hopeful, a guy about to open his dream restaurant with the support of his family. Now I was sitting alone in a dark apartment, my marriage circling the drain, my family treating me like I was the unreasonable one. And the only people who seemed to understand were complete strangers on the internet who'd seen my sign and decided I was either a hero or a cautionary tale, depending on their own family dynamics. My phone buzzed with a notification. It was a reservation request through the restaurant's website, accompanied by a message, "Saw your story online. My family pulled similar crap at my wedding. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the one you're born with. Can't wait to try your food and support a fellow survivor of family drama. Also, do you have vegetarian options?" I smiled despite everything, typed out a response confirming the reservation and detailing our vegetarian menu, and then opened my Notes app. If I was going to blow up my life, I might as well go all in. I started writing a post for the restaurant's social media. Update: the Ember Table is still family-free and thriving. Thanks to everyone who's reached out with support and their own stories of family dysfunction. You're all invited to be part of my chosen family. First-time diners get a complimentary glass of wine, because sometimes you need alcohol to process your trauma, and I believe in combining therapy with good food. I hit post, turned off my phone, and finally allowed myself to feel everything I'd been holding back for days. Tomorrow I'd figure out how to run a restaurant, save my marriage if it was even worth saving, and deal with the fallout from my family. Tonight, I was just going to sit in the dark and let myself be angry and hurt and completely done with everyone's bullshit. Friday arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train carrying my anxiety and a healthy dose of imposter syndrome, because apparently the universe decided that dealing with a disintegrating marriage and a family civil war wasn't quite enough drama for 1 week. The food critic was coming tonight. Patricia Morrison, who'd made grown chefs cry with her reviews and had once described a Michelin-starred restaurant's signature dish as an expensive mistake that should apologize to the ingredients it wasted. No pressure at all. Just my entire professional reputation riding on whether I could impress a woman who probably ate dreams for breakfast and washed them down with the tears of failed restaurateurs. I'd been at the Ember Table since 5 in the morning, prepping, tasting, adjusting, and generally spiraling into the kind of perfectionist frenzy that makes normal people worry about your mental health. My sous chef, a 26-year-old culinary school graduate named Maya who had more talent in her pinky finger than most people had in their entire bodies, had shown up at 6 and immediately made me sit down and drink water because apparently I looked like a Victorian ghost who'd been personally victimized by a chicken breast. Her words, not mine, but honestly pretty accurate. "Chef, you need to chill," Maya said, physically removing a whisk from my hand because I'd been standing at the same station stirring the same sauce for probably 20 minutes without realizing it. The menu is perfect. The prep is perfect. Everything is ready. If you keep tweaking things, you're going to tweak them right into mediocrity because you've lost all perspective. She was right, of course, which was annoying because I was the head chef and technically her boss. But also one of the reasons I'd hired her was because she had the guts to tell me when I was being an idiot. What if she hates it? I said, and I heard the desperation in my own voice, the kind of vulnerability that I usually kept locked away behind sarcasm and bravado. What if this whole thing, the viral post, the family drama, the packed reservations, what if it's all just people watching a train wreck and the food is actually garbage? Maya looked at me with an expression that was equal parts sympathy and exasperation, like a parent dealing with a child who just asked if monsters were real. Okay, first of all, your food is phenomenal and you know it. Second, Patricia Morrison requested a reservation, which means she's interested in what you're doing here, not just the drama. And third, even if she writes a bad review, which she won't, you're booked solid for the next 2 weeks with people who already love what you're about. So maybe stop catastrophizing and start believing in yourself for like 5 consecutive minutes. Before I could respond with something appropriately self-deprecating, the back door opened and Dylan walked in like he owned the place, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent and carrying what appeared to be a briefcase because apparently he thought showing up to a restaurant kitchen dressed like a corporate lawyer was a normal thing to do. Maya looked at him, then at me, then back at him, her expression clearly asking whether she should grab a knife or just escort him out with verbal force. "We're closed to family," I said flatly, not even bothering to look up from the station where I was now obsessively checking the temperature of various sauces that definitely didn't need checking. "I'm not here as family," Dylan said, and his voice had that quality that I recognized from every business meeting our dad had ever dragged me to, smooth, confident, completely convinced of its own authority. "I'm here as a potential business partner. Dad sent me with a formal proposal." I finally looked up at him, really looked, and saw not just my younger brother, but a complete stranger wearing my brother's face, someone who'd somehow convinced himself that showing up uninvited to my restaurant on one of the most important nights of my career with a briefcase full of corporate takeover plans was a reasonable thing to do. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly, setting down my spoon with deliberate care, because if I held on to it, I might throw it at his head. "Patricia Morrison is coming in 4 hours. I'm in the middle of final prep. My marriage is falling apart. And you thought this was the perfect time to ambush me with a business proposal that I already rejected when Dad tried this same stunt 3 days ago." Dylan had the audacity to look confused, like he genuinely couldn't understand why I wasn't grateful for this interruption. "I'm trying to help you, Mason. We all are. This restaurant could be something really special with the right management structure, proper financial backing, and someone who understands the business side handling operations while you focus on the creative aspects." "Get out," I said quietly. "Mason, just look at the proposal. Get out." My voice was louder now, echoing off the stainless steel surfaces of the kitchen. "I don't care about your proposal, your management structure, or your business degree. I care about making food that means something, about building something that's mine, and right now I care about not murdering my brother in front of witnesses 4 hours before the most important service of my life. So do us both a favor and leave before I do something we'll both regret, but I'll secretly enjoy." Maya stepped forward, positioning herself between me and Dylan in a way that suggested she was absolutely ready to physically remove him if necessary. "You heard, Chef. Time to go." Dylan looked between us, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally settling on something that might have been hurt if I was feeling generous enough to interpret it that way. He clutched his briefcase tighter and headed toward the door, but paused with his hand on the handle. "You're making a mistake, Mason. You can't do this alone. Watch me," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. Patricia Morrison arrived at exactly 7:30, which I knew because I'd been watching the door like a paranoid security guard for the past 45 minutes, while simultaneously trying to appear calm and professional to the other diners who'd packed the restaurant to capacity. She was smaller than I'd imagined, maybe 5'4" in heels, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that probably cost more than my car. She wore all black, which seemed like either a power move or a warning, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you can destroy someone's career with a well-placed adjective. My hostess, a college student named Becca who I'd hired specifically because she had the kind of unflappable personality that didn't crack under pressure, seated Patricia at table 7, the corner table with the best lighting and a perfect view of the open kitchen, which meant the critic would be watching every single move I made for the next 2 hours. Fantastic. Just what my anxiety needed. I sent out her first course, a butternut squash soup with brown butter, crispy sage, and a drizzle of aged balsamic that I'd been perfecting for 3 months, and watched from the kitchen as she took her first spoonful. Her expression revealed absolutely nothing. She could have been eating ambrosia from the gods or cafeteria sludge, and I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. This woman had a poker face that would make professional gamblers weep with envy. The second course went out, pan-seared scallops with a pea puree, pancetta crisps, and microgreens that I'd sourced from a local farm specifically because I'm apparently a masochist who enjoys spending extra money on tiny vegetables. Patricia ate slowly, deliberately, taking notes between bites on a small leather notebook that she produced from her purse. Every time she wrote something, my heart rate spiked like I was running a marathon while simultaneously having a panic attack. "Chef, you're going to give yourself a stroke," Maya whispered, nudging me away from where I'd been staring out at the dining room like a creepy stalker. "Go work on the mains. Stop watching her. You're being weird." She was right, but that didn't stop me from glancing over every 30 seconds while I plated the main courses for the other tables. The restaurant was buzzing with energy tonight, every seat filled, conversation and laughter creating that perfect ambient noise that made a space feel alive. Several diners had mentioned the viral post when they arrived, thanking me for keeping it real and standing up to toxic family dynamics, which was simultaneously validating and deeply weird because I was essentially being celebrated for having a public meltdown. Patricia's main course, my signature dish, a pan-roasted duck breast with cherry gastrique, creamy polenta, and roasted Brussels sprouts, went out at 8:45. I'd worked on this dish for 6 months, testing different duck breeds, adjusting the cooking time by literal seconds, perfecting the balance of sweet and savory in the sauce until it was exactly right. If anything was going to impress her, it would be this. Or it would confirm that I was a fraud who had no business running a restaurant. Really could go either way at this point. I watched her cut into the duck, perfectly medium rare, the skin crispy and glistening, the meat pink and tender. She took a bite, chewed slowly, made another note in her notebook. My soul briefly left my body and took a vacation to somewhere less stressful, like an active war zone or a tax audit. The dessert course was a dark chocolate torte with raspberry coulis and vanilla bean ice cream. Simple, but executed flawlessly because sometimes the classics work for a reason. Patricia ate it with the same measured deliberation she'd applied to every other course, her expression never changing, her pen moving across the notebook in ways that could either be praise or my professional obituary. She finished, paid her check without speaking to anyone except to say thank you to Becca, and left at exactly 10 o'clock. The entire restaurant seemed to exhale collectively once she was gone, like we'd all been holding our breath for the past 2.5 hours. "Well," Maya said, appearing at my elbow with a glass of whiskey that I definitely needed and probably deserved, "that happened. Now we wait. Now we wait," I echoed, taking the glass and downing half of it in one gulp because I'd earned the right to make questionable decisions about alcohol consumption. The review posted online at 11:30 that night, which I know because I'd been refreshing Patricia Morrison's website every 3 minutes like an obsessed teenager waiting for their crush to text back. Maya had forced me to sit in the office because apparently my manic pacing was disturbing the closing staff and making everyone think the health inspector was coming. The headline appeared on my screen, "The Ember Table, where family drama meets culinary excellence." My hands were shaking as I started reading. Mason Blake's new restaurant has been making headlines for all the wrong reasons, or perhaps all the right ones. The chef's viral decision to ban his family after they skipped his grand opening could have been a gimmick, a publicity stunt designed to generate buzz without substance to back it up. I went in expecting drama. What I found was artistry. I had to stop reading for a second to breathe. Blake's butternut squash soup is a revelation, rich and velvety with layers of flavor that unfold with each spoonful. The scallops were perfectly seared, the pea puree bright and fresh, every element on the plate serving a purpose. But it's the duck. Oh, the duck. That announces Blake as a chef to watch. Crispy skin that shatters under the fork, meat cooked to absolute perfection, and a cherry gastrique that balances sweet and tart with the precision of someone who actually cares about their craft. I kept reading, my heart pounding, hardly believing what I was seeing. The Ember Table isn't just good. It's exceptional. And more than that, it's authentic, a chef cooking food that means something, in a space that feels personal rather than corporate. Sometimes the best revenge isn't living well. It's cooking brilliantly. 5 stars. 5 stars. 5 stars. I read it 3 more times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from stress and sleep deprivation. The review went nuclear by morning. I woke up on the office couch at the Ember Table, because apparently I'd passed out there after reading Patricia Morrison's review approximately 17 times while drinking the rest of that whiskey, to my phone vibrating itself off the desk with the force of a small earthquake. Notifications were flooding in faster than I could process them. Instagram followers skyrocketing, reservation requests backing up like traffic on a Friday afternoon, emails from food magazines wanting interviews, and even a voicemail from someone claiming to be a producer for a cooking show that I was 90% sure was legitimate and 10% convinced was an elaborate prank. Maya burst through the office door at 7 in the morning holding 2 coffees and a bagel, looking simultaneously excited and exhausted. "Chef, have you seen the numbers? We're booked solid for the next 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Mason. I had to start a waiting list. A literal waiting list. Do you know how fancy that makes us sound? We're like 3 months old, and we have a waiting list." I sat up, my neck screaming in protest from sleeping on a couch that was definitely not designed for human rest, and took the coffee she offered like it was liquid salvation. "This is insane," I said, my voice rough from sleep and probably mild dehydration. "This is actually insane. What if I can't sustain this? What if it was just one good night, and everything else is garbage?" "Stop it," Maya said firmly, sitting down across from me with her own coffee. "You've been cooking at this level consistently since we opened. The only difference is now people know about it. Patricia Morrison doesn't give 5 stars because she feels charitable. She gives them because the food earned them. Your food earned them. So maybe, just maybe, you could accept that you're actually good at this and stop waiting for the other shoe to drop." Before I could respond with something appropriately self-deprecating, my phone started ringing. Mom. Of course. I stared at it for a long moment, debating whether answering would be an act of self-care or self-destruction, and ultimately decided that avoiding her would only delay the inevitable. "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to sound more awake and less like someone who'd slept in their clothes and smelled vaguely of whiskey and kitchen grease. "Mason, honey, we just saw the review." Her voice was bright, enthusiastic, completely devoid of any acknowledgement that we'd spent the last week in the middle of a family war. 5 stars. Can you believe it? We're so proud of you. Your father and I were just saying we need to come by for dinner this week to celebrate. And Dylan wants to bring some colleagues from work. It would be great exposure for the restaurant. I felt Maya watching me, her expression shifting from excited to cautious as she clearly picked up on the direction this conversation was heading. I took a long sip of coffee, buying myself a few seconds to decide how to handle this, whether to take the olive branch being offered or set it on fire and watch it burn. "Mom," I said carefully, "do you remember the sign on the front door of my restaurant?" There was a pause. "Oh, Mason, surely that doesn't apply now. We were all upset. Things were said. But this is a time for celebration. Family should celebrate together. Family should have shown up in the first place," I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. Family should have been there on opening night, instead of at Dylan's barbecue. Family should have supported me before I got a 5-star review, not after when it became socially advantageous to be associated with my success. "That's not fair," Mom protested, her voice taking on that wounded quality that she used when she wanted to guilt me into backing down. "We made a mistake. We've apologized. How long are you going to punish us for one error in judgment?" "You haven't apologized, Mom." "Not really. You've explained, justified, and minimized. But nobody has actually said, 'I'm sorry we hurt you, and we understand why you're upset.' And now that I've gotten validation from a stranger with a pen and a taste for good food, suddenly everyone wants to come back like nothing happened. I stood up, pacing the small office because sitting still was making my skin crawl. Here's the thing, I don't need you now. I needed you a week ago, and you chose Dylan. So congratulations, you can keep choosing Dylan. The restaurant stays family-free. You're being incredibly childish about this, Mom said, her sympathy evaporating faster than water on a hot griddle. Your father was right. You're letting pride destroy your relationships. No, I corrected her. I'm letting consequences exist. There's a difference. You all made a choice, and now you're upset that the choice has repercussions. That's not me being childish. That's me finally having enough self-respect to expect better treatment from the people who are supposed to love me unconditionally. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could practically feel her cycling through different approaches to make me back down. Finally, she said, Haley's very upset, you know. She came by yesterday, asking if we'd talk to you. She's worried about the direction you're heading. Haley left me, I said bluntly. She gave me an ultimatum. Apologize to everyone and accept Dad's takeover of my restaurant, or she walks. So unless she's changed her mind and decided that my dignity is worth more than your approval, I don't really care what she's worried about. Mason, I have to go, Mom. I have a restaurant to run. One that apparently has a 6-week waiting list now, which is pretty impressive for someone who's supposedly making terrible life decisions. I hung up before she could respond, immediately felt guilty about it, then reminded myself that guilt was just another tool people use to manipulate you into accepting less than you deserved. Maya was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You okay, chef? Honestly, I have no idea, I admitted. My restaurant just got a 5-star review. I should be ecstatic. Instead, I feel like I'm standing in the ruins of my entire life wondering if success was worth losing everything else. Maybe you didn't lose it, Maya suggested gently. Maybe you just finally saw it clearly. The review went nuclear by morning. I woke up on the office couch at the Ember table, because apparently I'd passed out there after reading Patricia Morrison's review approximately 17 times while drinking the rest of that whiskey, to my phone vibrating itself off the desk with the force of a small earthquake. Notifications were flooding in faster than I could process them. Instagram followers skyrocketing, reservation requests backing up like traffic on a Friday afternoon, emails from food magazines wanting interviews, and even a voicemail from someone claiming to be a producer for a cooking show that I was 90% sure was legitimate and 10% convinced was an elaborate prank. Maya burst through the office door at 7 in the morning holding 2 coffees and a bagel, looking simultaneously excited and exhausted. Chef, have you seen the numbers? We're booked solid for the next 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Mason. I had to start a waiting list. A literal waiting list. Do you know how fancy that makes us sound? We're like 3 months old, and we have a waiting list. I sat up, my neck screaming in protest from sleeping on a couch that was definitely not designed for human rest, and took the coffee she offered like it was liquid salvation. This is insane, I said, my voice rough from sleep and probably mild dehydration. This is actually insane. What if I can't sustain this? What if it was just one good night, and everything else is garbage? Stop it, Maya said firmly, sitting down across from me with her own coffee. You've been cooking at this level consistently since we opened. The only difference is now people know about it. Patricia Morrison doesn't give 5 stars because she feels charitable. She gives them because the food earned them. Your food earned them. So maybe, just maybe, you could accept that you're actually good at this and stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. Before I could respond with something appropriately self-deprecating, my phone started ringing. Mom. Of course. I stared at it for a long moment, debating whether answering would be an act of self-care or self-destruction, and ultimately decided that avoiding her would only delay the inevitable. Hi, Mom, I said, trying to sound more awake and less like someone who'd slept in their clothes and smelled vaguely of whiskey and kitchen grease. Mason, honey, we just saw the review. Her voice was bright, enthusiastic, completely devoid of any acknowledgement that we'd spent the last week in the middle of a family war. 5 stars. Can you believe it? We're so proud of you. Your father and I were just saying we need to come by for dinner this week to celebrate. And Dylan wants to bring some colleagues from work. It would be great exposure for the restaurant. I felt Maya watching me, her expression shifting from excited to cautious as she clearly picked up on the direction this conversation was heading. I took a long sip of coffee, buying myself a few seconds to decide how to handle this, whether to take the olive branch being offered or set it on fire and watch it burn. Mom, I said carefully, do you remember the sign on the front door of my restaurant? There was a pause. Oh, Mason, surely that doesn't apply now. We were all upset. Things were said. But this is a time for celebration. Family should celebrate together. Family should have shown up in the first place. I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. Family should have been there on opening night, instead of at Dylan's barbecue. Family should have supported me before I got a 5-star review, not after when it became socially advantageous to be associated with my success. That's not fair, Mom protested, her voice taking on that wounded quality that she used when she wanted to guilt me into backing down. We made a mistake. We've apologized. How long are you going to punish us for one error in judgment? You haven't apologized, Mom. Not really. You've explained, justified, and minimized. But nobody has actually said, I'm sorry we hurt you, and we understand why you're upset. And now that I've gotten validation from a stranger with a pen and a taste for good food, suddenly everyone wants to come back like nothing happened. I stood up, pacing the small office because sitting still was making my skin crawl. Here's the thing, I don't need you now. I needed you a week ago, and you chose Dylan. So congratulations, you can keep choosing Dylan. The restaurant stays family-free. You're being incredibly childish about this, Mom said, her sympathy evaporating faster than water on a hot griddle. Your father was right. You're letting pride destroy your relationships. No, I corrected her. I'm letting consequences exist. There's a difference. You all made a choice, and now you're upset that the choice has repercussions. That's not me being childish. That's me finally having enough self-respect to expect better treatment from the people who are supposed to love me unconditionally. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could practically feel her cycling through different approaches to make me back down. Finally, she said, Haley's very upset, you know. She came by yesterday, asking if we'd talk to you. She's worried about the direction you're heading. Haley left me, I said bluntly. She gave me an ultimatum. Apologize to everyone and accept Dad's takeover of my restaurant, or she walks. So unless she's changed her mind and decided that my dignity is worth more than your approval, I don't really care what she's worried about. Mason, I have to go, Mom. I have a restaurant to run. One that apparently has a 6-week waiting list now, which is pretty impressive for someone who's supposedly making terrible life decisions. I hung up before she could respond, immediately felt guilty about it. Then reminded myself that guilt was just another tool people use to manipulate you into accepting less than you deserved. Maya was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You okay, chef? Honestly, I have no idea, I admitted. My restaurant just got a 5-star review. I should be ecstatic. Instead, I feel like I'm standing in the ruins of my entire life wondering if success was worth losing everything else. Maybe you didn't lose it, Maya suggested gently. Maybe you just finally saw it clearly. 3 days after Patricia Morrison's review turned my restaurant into the hottest reservation in town, Haley showed up during lunch service looking like she'd walked straight out of a Pinterest board titled, Woman Who's About to Have a Serious Conversation. She was wearing that cream-colored sweater I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago, the one she always wore when she wanted to remind me of better times, and her hair was down in those loose waves that took her 45 minutes to achieve, but were supposed to look effortless. She stood just inside the doorway, clutching her purse like a shield, her eyes scanning the packed dining room with an expression that cycled between impressed and resentful in a way that would have been fascinating if it wasn't so personally devastating. Becca approached her with menus, but Haley shook her head and pointed toward me in the open kitchen. I watched this exchange while simultaneously plating a salmon dish that deserved my full attention, but was getting about 60% of it because my wife, separated wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, we really needed to define that, was standing in my restaurant for the first time since opening night, and the symbolism wasn't lost on me even if I was trying really hard to ignore it. I finished the plate, handed it off to the server, and wiped my hands on my apron before walking out to meet her. We stood there in the small space between the kitchen and the dining room, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same one she'd been wearing since college, but far enough apart that it felt like we were on different continents. The place looks great, she said, her voice soft in a way that felt calculated, like she'd rehearsed this conversation during the drive over. Really great. I'm happy for you, Mason. The review was incredible. Thanks, I said, crossing my arms over my chest because I needed to do something with my hands that wasn't reaching for her or pushing her away, and this seemed like a neutral middle ground. Did you come here just to tell me that? Or was there something else? She glanced around at the crowded restaurant, at the people laughing and eating and completely oblivious to the personal drama unfolding in their midst. Can we talk? Somewhere private. I led her to the office, which was barely big enough for two people and smelled like coffee and the stress sweat of administrative work I'd been avoiding. She sat in the chair across from my desk, and I leaned against the doorframe because sitting felt too intimate, too much like we were actually having a conversation instead of whatever this was about to be. I've been thinking a lot over the past week, Haley started, and I could already tell from her tone where this was going. It was the same voice she used when she was about to deliver bad news while trying to frame it as good news, like when she'd told me we needed to postpone our honeymoon because her job needed her, or when she'd suggested I look into more stable career options after my last restaurant job had ended badly. About us, about the restaurant, about everything that's happened. And I think I understand now why you were so upset. You think you understand, I repeated, letting the words hang there like expired produce. I do, she insisted, leaning forward with her hands clasped together in that earnest way that was supposed to convey sincerity. We hurt you. I hurt you. Missing your opening night was wrong, and I should have been there no matter what else was happening. I see that now. What changed? I asked, because I genuinely wanted to know. Was it the 5-star review? The waiting list? The fact that people are actually taking my restaurant seriously now? Because a week ago you were telling me I needed to apologize to my family and accept my dad's hostile takeover. What exactly happened between then and now that suddenly made you understand? She flinched, and I felt a small, petty satisfaction at having landed the hit. That's not fair, Mason. I'm trying to apologize here. Are you? I pushed off from the doorframe, moving to sit behind my desk because I needed the physical barrier between us. Because it sounds a lot like you're trying to get back into my good graces now that the restaurant is successful. It sounds like you're hedging your bets, making sure you don't miss out on being associated with something that's actually working. But where were you when I needed you? Where were you on opening night when I was standing here alone wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life? I made a mistake, Haley said, her voice rising slightly with frustration. I admitted that. I'm here trying to fix things. What more do you want from me? I want you to have been there the first time, I said, and I heard my voice crack slightly on the last word, felt the emotion I'd been holding back threatening to spill over. I want you to have chosen me over Dylan without needing a 5-star review to convince you I was worth it. I want you to have supported my dream when it was risky and uncertain and might have failed, not just now when it's safe and successful and makes you look good by association. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. So what? I'm supposed to just keep apologizing forever? I made one mistake, Mason. One. And you're acting like I committed some unforgivable sin. It wasn't one mistake, I said, my own voice rising now to match hers. It was the culmination of 2 years of you treating my restaurant like a hobby, like something that didn't really matter because it wasn't a real career like Dylan's corporate job or your position at the firm. It was every time you sided with my family when they questioned my choices. It was every "are you sure about this, and maybe you should reconsider," and "I'm just worried about our financial future" conversation where you made it clear that you didn't actually believe in what I was doing. I was trying to be practical, she protested. Someone had to think about the reality of the situation. You were investing everything we had into a restaurant when 70% of them fail in the first year. Excuse me for being concerned about our future. Our future, I repeated. Funny how it's our future when you're worried about money. But it was my risky decision when I was trying to build something meaningful. You can't have it both ways, Haley. You can't treat my dreams like they're reckless gambles and then show up wanting credit when they succeed. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression cycling through anger, hurt, and finally landing on something that looked almost like recognition. You've already decided, haven't you? This conversation was over before it started. You're not interested in working things out. You just want to punish me. I'm not punishing you, I said quietly. I'm just finally admitting that we want different things. You want security, stability, a partner who makes safe choices and fits into your family's expectations. I want someone who believes in me even when it's scary, who shows up even when it's inconvenient, who chooses me not because I'm successful, but because I'm worth it regardless. We're not those people for each other anymore. Maybe we never were. Haley's eyes filled with tears, and I felt my resolve waver for just a second before I remembered standing alone in my restaurant on opening night, watching her celebrate my brother on Instagram while I poured wine for no one. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice breaking. 4 years of marriage, just over? Because I missed one night. "It's over because you gave me an ultimatum," I said. "It's over because when you had to choose between supporting me and keeping peace with my family, you chose them. It's over because I finally realized that I deserve someone who's on my team unconditionally, not someone who keeps a scorecard of my failures and hedges their bets in case I don't succeed." She grabbed her purse, and I could see her hands shaking. "You're going to regret this, Mason. When the novelty wears off and the restaurant becomes just another job, when you're working 80-hour weeks and barely breaking even, when you realize that success isn't the same thing as happiness, you're going to regret pushing away everyone who cared about you." "Maybe," I admitted, "but at least I'll have tried. At least I'll know that I chose myself instead of sacrificing my dreams to make other people comfortable. That's worth something." She left without another word, the door to the office closing behind her with a soft click that somehow felt louder than if she'd slammed it. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the space where she'd been, feeling the weight of what had just happened settling over me like a heavy blanket. My marriage was over. Really, officially over. For years reduced to a conversation in a cramped office that smelled like stale coffee and disappointment. Maya knocked softly on the doorframe. "Chef, you okay? We've got 3 orders backing up and—" She stopped, taking in my expression. "What happened?" "Haley was here," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "We're done. Like, actually done." Maya winced sympathetically. "I'm sorry, Chef. That's rough." "Yeah," I agreed. "But also maybe necessary. Maybe even right. I don't know. Ask me again in 6 months when I've had time to process literally any of this." She nodded, then gestured toward the dining room. "People are waiting for food. You want to take a minute? Or do you want to come cook through the pain like a stereotypical chef in a movie?" I stood up, straightened my apron, and took a deep breath. "Let's cook. At least in the kitchen, I know what I'm doing." "That's the spirit," Maya said. "Healthy coping mechanisms are overrated anyway." I followed her back into the kitchen, back into the heat and noise and organized chaos that had become my sanctuary. Orders were piling up, tickets printing faster than we could clear them, the rhythm of service demanding my full attention in a way that left no room for processing emotions or questioning life choices. And maybe that was exactly what I needed right now. The simple, clear purpose of making food that would make people happy, even if my own happiness was currently scattered across the floor of my office along with the pieces of my marriage. Tomorrow I'd deal with the fallout. Tomorrow I'd call a lawyer, figure out the logistics, start the paperwork. Tonight, I had a restaurant to run and a waiting list to satisfy. Sometimes survival looks like putting one foot in front of the other. Sometimes it looks like plating the perfect dish while your personal life burns down around you. Either way, you keep moving forward because stopping means drowning, and I'd already come too far to give up now. 6 weeks after Patricia Morrison's review, the Ember Table had become something I'd never quite imagined when I first signed the lease on this space. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It had transformed into something almost like a community center for people with complicated family relationships and a love for good food. The waiting list had grown to 8 weeks. We'd been featured in 3 national publications, and I'd had to hire 2 more line cooks just to keep up with demand. But more than that, something unexpected had happened. The people who'd come because of the viral family band story had stayed because they felt like they belonged here, like they'd found something they didn't even know they were looking for. Tuesday nights had accidentally become chosen family dinners after a regular customer named Sarah suggested it in the comments of one of my Instagram posts. The concept was simple. People who didn't have supportive biological families or who just wanted to eat with like-minded folks could come in, and we'd seat them at a long communal table in the center of the dining room. I'd serve a family-style meal, and people would talk, share stories, laugh, and occasionally cry into their wine while strangers turned friends passed them breadsticks and napkins. It was weird and beautiful and exactly the kind of thing that made no business sense, but felt absolutely right. Tonight's chosen family dinner had 23 people, ranging from a college kid whose parents had disowned him for dropping out of pre-med to pursue art, to a woman in her 60s who'd finally left her toxic marriage and was learning how to build a life on her own terms. Maya had outdone herself with the menu: herb-roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, and a salad that actually made people excited about eating greens. I was making my rounds, checking in with tables, when Becca approached me with an uncertain expression. "Chef, there's someone at the door," she said quietly. "She says she's your mom. She doesn't have a reservation, but she's asking if she can talk to you." My stomach dropped. I hadn't spoken to my mother since that phone call 6 weeks ago, hadn't responded to any of the texts or voicemails that had gradually decreased in frequency as the weeks passed. Part of me had assumed she'd given up, that my family had collectively decided I was a lost cause and moved on with their lives. Apparently, I'd assumed wrong. "Tell her I'm busy with service," I started to say, but then I saw her through the window. She was standing outside in the cold November evening, wearing a coat I'd bought her for Mother's Day 3 years ago, looking smaller and older than I remembered. She wasn't with Dad or Dylan. She was alone. "Actually," I said, changing my mind, "give me 5 minutes to finish this round, then send her back to the office." Maya caught my eye from the kitchen, raising her eyebrows in a silent question. I nodded, and she gave me a thumbs up that somehow conveyed both support and a reminder that she had a very sharp knife collection if things went badly. It was the kind of friendship you couldn't buy, but could absolutely earn through mutual trauma and shared passion for food. My mother looked out of place in my tiny office, perched on the edge of the chair like she might need to make a quick escape. Her hands were folded in her lap, and I noticed she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. That was new. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure why I am," I admitted, leaning against my desk. "What do you want, Mom?" She took a deep breath, and I saw her hands tremble slightly. "I want to apologize. Really apologize, not the half-hearted attempts I made before. You were right about everything, Mason. We didn't support you. We chose Dylan over you, not just on opening night, but for years before that. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives, but all I saw was genuine regret and something that looked like pain. "What changed?" I asked. "I left your father," she said simply. 2 weeks ago. We're getting divorced. And when I was packing my things, going through old photos and letters, I realized how many of your accomplishments we'd minimized or ignored over the years. Your culinary school graduation, your first job at that French restaurant, all the small milestones that we treated like they didn't matter because they weren't what we'd planned for you. And then missing your opening night. Mason, I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. But I needed you to know that I see it now. I see how badly we failed you." "Why now?" I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. "Why does it take you leaving Dad to finally see what you've been doing to me for years?" "Because I stopped making excuses for him, which meant I had to stop making excuses for myself," she said. "Because I realized that I'd spent 35 years of marriage prioritizing his comfort over everything else, including my children's happiness. Because I'm tired of being complicit in hurting people I love just to avoid conflict. I wanted to stay angry. God, I wanted to hold on to that righteous fury that had sustained me through the past 6 weeks. But looking at my mother sitting in my office, visibly smaller without my father's presence looming behind her, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. "I can't let you into the restaurant," I said finally. "Not yet. The family-free policy stays." "I understand," she said, standing up. "I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because of the 5-star review or the success, but because you had the courage to set boundaries and stick to them even when it cost you everything. You're stronger than I ever was." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Your chosen family dinners? They're beautiful. The kind of thing this world needs more of. You're building something really special here, Mason." After she left, I sat alone in my office for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Everything okay? Need me to poison anyone's food?" "Kidding, mostly." I smiled despite everything and headed back to the dining room, where 23 people who'd all been hurt by their families in different ways were laughing together over garlic mashed potatoes and shared trauma. Sarah caught my eye and raised her wine glass in a silent toast. I raised mine back. Maybe this was what success actually looked like. not the review or the waiting list or the packed dining room, but this feeling of having built something that mattered to people. A place where being yourself was enough, where complicated family histories were understood rather than judged, where the only requirement for belonging was showing up. My biological family had taught me what I didn't want. These people were teaching me what I did. And that, I decided, was worth every bridge I'd burned to get here.